City of Stevens Point Finance Committee meeting, recorded December 13, 2021.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and happy holidays. It's that festive time of year when we're going to get rain, so unfortunately. Calling the Finance Committee meeting of the City of Stevens Point to order. It is 6:19. And the first item on our agenda is a roll call.
All right, Dalton.
Here.
Johnson.
I am here.
Morrow.
Here.
Shore.
Here.
Slowinski.
Here.
5 present.
Thank you very much. Second item on our non-action items is a presentation on funding for the Business 51 project. Corey, thanks for doing such a nice job on a complex topic. So.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about Business 51 project financing. Right off the bat, I want to note that the numbers that we're going to talk about are estimates and can change, and that this is obviously our first real conversation about the financing. So at this point, we're really trying to more talk about this conceptually to give you an idea of what we're looking at rather than, things that are very hard and fast and set in stone. So Mayor, if you want to get started. So to dive right into it, the cost estimates, what are we looking at? We're looking at a total project of almost $52 million is the current estimate, $51,790,000, broken up into 3 segments. So approximately $9.6 million for the north segment, and that's planned for construction in 2024. The reason why it's planned for 2024 is because it would be financed with TIF 5, and TIF 5 is nearing the end of its expenditure period. We also have the south segment at $19.6 million. That's slated for construction 2027, 2028. And the central segment, $22.4, almost $22.5 million. Construction 2031, 2032. So we're looking at about an 11-year timeline. So definitely, a lot can change over 11 years, but this is kind of what we're looking at for now. This project timeline was put together by AECom, and I think it does a really nice job of sort of showing what's going on during the different years of the project. As you can see, the various phases do have lead time. So you've got design, you've got real estate acquisition that happens before the actual construction starts. So this really lays out when, the design and the real estate acquisition and everything will happen for each phase. So some of those expenses, of course, will be incurred before construction starts because you're paying for design, you're paying for real estate acquisition. So this is the projected costs by year. Obviously, you see, the high years are those years where we're doing the respective phases and doing construction. You're looking at about $9 million a year for those construction years. And then in the off years, you still do have expenses related to design, related to real estate acquisition, and those are right around $1 million a year, give or take, depending on the year. So you definitely do have financial impacts throughout the full 11-year period that we'll need to account for through our capital budgeting process. Okay, now one of the items that really makes this project difficult for me to tell you precisely what the financial impact is going to be is that a big wild card is grants. And our best case scenario, you can get up to 80% grant funding. Well, if that's the case, then this is a very manageable project for us because that would be $41 million funded by grants, $10 million would be the city share. Actually that's right in line with our usual road project budgets, especially if you look over several years. However, that would be really optimistic to assume that the whole thing gets 80% funded by grants. I would love that. I would be incredibly happy. But of course, we do need to prepare for the worst case scenario, and I would say the worst case scenario would be we don't get any grant funding at all. And then on top of that, potentially you could also have higher than anticipated construction costs, especially in this current inflationary environment. So basically what we're trying to do is plan for a range of $10 to $52 million, which of course is quite a wide range to try to plan for. But some of the scenarios that I included in this presentation have planned for that worst case scenario, the $52 million. So how big is $52 million for the city of Stevens Point? Wanted to include this information because, sometimes it's like, okay, well, every number that we talk about, seems big for us because we're always talking about hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars when we're talking about capital budgets and operating budgets and so forth. But $52 million is big even for the usual scale of what we do. Our total general obligation debt is only $28.7 million. So $52 million is almost double our current general obligation debt. We have an annual tax levy of $18.7 million. Our 2022 capital budget is $7.8 million. So $52 million you're looking about, that's equal to about 7 years of capital budgets almost. So certainly it's significant in its size for sure. And then also note that the road construction budget, right now we're budgeting $4 million a year for road construction. So $52 million, 13 years worth of road construction. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to lay out is the need to balance three competing priorities that I see as sort of needing some compromise between all three. And those are the financial condition and debt capacity and bond rating of the city. That kind of all is one point there. Obviously, we want to have a somewhat reasonable property tax rate. That's something that we need to balance. And then also our overall capital spending and pace of projects. So I want to go through each one just a little bit through the next slides here. So first of all, for our financial condition and our bond rating, right now we have a debt to equalized value ratio of 1.23%. And the reason why that's an important metric is because typically you're repaying debt with property taxes. So that's a measure of, okay, how much are you leveraging what you have in terms of a tax base and how much burden are you placing on them, and are you sort of living within your means in terms of what your capacity is of your community to repay this money. The Moody's scorecard range that we have, so basically when we go for a bond rating, Moody's uses a scorecard. They go through all of our different financial metrics such as debt, such as fund balance, the amount of savings that we have, and they basically rank it on the scorecard as far as, okay, the city of Stevens Point falls into this category or that category on the scorecard. So our current category on debt to equalized value, right now we're in a category of 0.75% to 1.75%.
Hey, John, it's Melanie. Wanted to give you a call about all steel structures. Had an issue come up on that plan today, and I want to just give you a
Let's
heads
see
up.
where this goes.
All right.
All right.
So.
Is there anything else you want to tell us?
Yeah. I can't believe that this conversation about, debt and our Moody's rating wouldn't be interesting for that person. But so basically, as we're looking at this, want to stay within that current category so that our bond rating doesn't change. So my recommendation would be we keep it to 1.6% debt to equalized value. So that does give us some room to increase. The reason why I would suggest 1.6 is obviously when you're talking about bond rating analysts, they're very analytical people, they're data people, they're numbers people. If we say, let's push it to 1.74, they're going to notice that, okay, they're effectively in this category over here at this point. So that's why I'd suggest 1.6%. And right now, that gives us about $8.6 million in flexibility as far as what I think we could do. My other recommendation is, a lot of times our bond rating agencies, and really our constituents also, I think a lot of people like to see stability, of operations, and not see wild swings and wild spikes. So as much as possible, as we work through this, like to spread out those spikes as much as we can, understanding that, okay, if we're going to fund a project of this magnitude, debt is going to have to go up a little bit, but trying to avoid huge, dramatic spikes. And the more that we can smooth that out, I think that the better off that will be. So next up, property tax rates. So one of the things that I think we have to think about is planning ahead so that we can phase in any adjustments. So especially as we identify the potential impacts here, that we don't have dramatic changes in the property tax rate. And the other concern that I think we have right now with property tax rates and making sure that it's adequate to fund what we need to do as a city in terms of capital is that we also definitely have inflation right now, and we have capital projects. We've had this issue for a couple of years, but I think it definitely is continuing, is the cost increases for capital projects. So as I look over the next, 6 or 7 years, I think our major issue with property taxes and capital budgets is going to be both keeping pace with inflation and trying to keep pace with those cost increases, and then also to prepare to fund the Business 51 project. So to an extent, we're trying to do two things at once. And I think, basically we're going to have to do the best we can. And one component of this project that we need to keep in mind, especially as we try to fund, let's say, the second phase, is that there are multiple phases to this project. So if there was just one phase and then we were done, well, maybe you wouldn't have to have a real rapid rate of debt repayment because you don't need to rebuild capacity for a future phase. However, this project has multiple phases, so that's something that we need to keep in mind until we get to the last phase, of course, is that we need to make sure that we're rebuilding enough debt capacity to be able to do the next phase. And then finally, we have our overall capital spending, the pace of projects. So right now, we do budget $4 million a year for road projects. And the thought right now is that those years where we're doing the Business 51 construction, that would be the road project for the year. That does obviously make sense to a point that certainly our engineering department will have plenty to do with these major Business 51 projects, and Business 51 is a road. I mean, it is legitimately, a road project. However, you are looking then at 5 years where that would be the only project, and that would be the focus. The good news there is, 5 years, $4 million a year, that's $20 million. That definitely helps for funding Business 51. But, it also is a concern, especially as we look at the overall condition of our roads. We look at capital planning. It's definitely something to think about, if we have 5 gap years. And I think for sure we want to make sure then that the other years we can continue to have adequate funding for roads so that we don't fall, too far behind at the end of this. So in summary, basically, you've got 3 competing priorities. I think that there's room to give a little bit with each one, and you really need that compromise between all 3 to make it work. And if we take one of these and we say we absolutely can't compromise at all on that, then the impact of that is that puts a lot of burden on the other 2. So for instance, if I said we can't compromise on, the debt going up a little bit, okay, well now you're really putting pressure on, the tax levy, and capital projects, because you can't compromise on one. So wanted to go through what each phase looks like. And again, I would say this is, pretty initial at this point, but we've got phase one, the Northside project. We're looking at an $8.5 million construction cost. Also, if you try to compare this to the numbers that I said earlier, the numbers that I gave earlier included design and real estate acquisition. So that's why these numbers are going to be different, and it's not that, the math doesn't work. It's just we're only talking about construction costs here. It would be a TIF 5 project. The TIF 5 expenditure period ends May 16th, 2027. And then every TIF district has a 5-year period at the end of its life where basically it can't incur any new project costs. It can continue to make debt payments. It can continue to meet its obligations. But if you want to do, a development agreement, or you want to do a capital project in that TIF district, you can't. So that's a really critical piece of this planning. It's something that I've had a lot of conversations with Director Badoon about, that, basically we've got a hard deadline on this as far as we need to have the Northside project done, before 2027, because otherwise you miss your window. So would it have to be 2024? I mean, it could be 2025. Wouldn't want it to be later than 2025, just because sometimes you have lingering items that need to be taken care of with a road project.
Corey?
Yeah.
So do you have any idea on what type of funds you are going to use out of that TIF 5 for this project?
Yes. So it would be the full $8.5 million.
Oh, it would be, okay.
It would, yes. And, that TIF district is cash positive, that I do believe that it could support
Entire.
the entire $8.5 million. And then it would be, repaying that debt basically. It should be able to repay $1.5 to $2 million of debt a year. So, and right now, where all of that money from TIF 5 is going, it's going to support TIF 6 to help TIF 6 repay its advance to the city. But that, TIF 6 has repaid a lot by 2024. It should be almost all the way paid back. So then TIF 5 basically can change focus from supporting the TIF 6 to doing this project.
So in all reality, we need to start, I guess, phase one is somewhat covered, if you will. Mm-hmm. So it's, the next two phases that are where we have to really start focusing on.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you're pretty confident with that?
Yeah, as far as TIF 5, I'm very confident. I mean, we see the cash flow now, so it's not even like we're projecting, future development.
Yeah, right.
Or future, anything happening there. It's just with what it is right now, it can do this.
That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. It definitely helps, especially when you're looking to fund a $52 million project. Definitely useful to have the TIF with the amount of resources that it has, and frankly, it is the major expenditure right now of TIF 5. It has really been supporting TIF 6, so it is also kind of nice that TIF district gets to kind of come home a little bit as far as spending the money in that district. I mean, there have been other expenses in TIF 5, but this would be a major project in TIF 5. So.
And that entire phase one falls within that TIF?
Yes, some of it might fall within, and I'd have to look at the map. Some of it could fall within TIF 11, especially now that we did the overlay. Right. But we also have the ability to transfer money from TIF 5 to TIF 11. So if that's the case, we can also transfer money from 5 to 11 to cover anything that would be in 11.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
There we go.
Okay, great. One other thing I wanted to mention is that we do have the end of the expenditure period for various TIF districts coming up. Some of these TIF districts don't have necessarily a lot of increment to work with as far as needing to look at making a big expenditure before the end of the expenditure period. However, one that is also in a strong position is TIF 9, and the end of that expenditure period comes up May 20th, 2028. So that's just another piece of the puzzle, something that we need to be aware of, because just like we're going through this exercise kind of with TIF 5 right now and making the plans for, okay, what does this TIF district need before it closes? We'll have to do the same thing with TIF District 9. There should be the potential there to do some projects to really get that area set up for development in the future. And the reason why I bring it up as part of this conversation is that that is another use of debt capacity, another need to borrow money, which happens pretty close to when we would be looking at starting phase 2. So it's just another thing that we have to have on the radar screen as we try to piece all of this together.
So just to verify, so that would be projects like the extension of roads and sewer and water for like a Myers or whatever would go out there?
Yes,
Okay,
yep.
Just
yep.
wanted to make sure I understood that. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. It could be the extension of roads. It could also be the purchase of land.
Land, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, so next, and kind of, yeah, getting into this point about TIF District 9 and so forth, and funding phase 2. So you do have a little bit of a challenge here where, phase 1 will increase the debt, and of course it will start repaying that, fairly aggressively, but it's not going to have it all paid off by 2027. So you have 2024, 2025, debt starts to come back down. The next year, probably looking at doing the TIF District 9 project, because we probably would want to avoid having it in the same year as phase 2 starts. Again, trying to avoid that huge spike in debt if we do, 2 really large items at once. So then 2027, phase 2 starts. So again, just something that we'll need to work through as far as the timing here. We have some things happening in somewhat rapid succession.
So you keep referencing TIF District 9 project. I mean, there's not like a specific project, it's just if there's any potential.
Right.
That's when we're gonna wanna
Right.
hone in on it in 2026.
Yes.
But there is no,
Yes, there is no project at this point.
right,
I do feel confident that we will have the increment to work with, to have a potential project. And I think that we would want to take advantage of that opportunity, because otherwise, say we let the expenditure period lapse and we don't do anything. And now, there's a need for a road extension that really could be useful for promoting future growth in that district. Well, if we don't do it during the expenditure period is over, we're done. So if somebody comes into my office in 2029 and says we need to do a road extension, in TIF District 9, it's like, well, sorry, we missed, the boat. So, and I think just given that area, I think that is an area that does lend itself to, investment, since it is, primarily, vacant land. So I'm sure that there'll be no shortage of, things that we can do to set that area up for future growth.
right.
Thank you.
Okay. So getting into phase 2, the south side. So looking at a construction cost of $15.9 million, would occur over 2 years. So you've got the existing road budget of $8 million, $4 million a year over the 2 years. So you're looking at about a $7.9 million increase in debt. So let's say we wanted to pay that all off in 4 years. to fully restore debt capacity for Phase 3. You're looking at an annual payment of a little bit over $2 million and a levy impact of $1.21 a thousand, or 11% increase. Now, I want to stress, I think this is more to show you sort of one end of the range, not necessarily to say that I think that this is what's going to happen. I do think that, we shouldn't have to pay it all off within 4 years. I think that there should be some flexibility to pay some of it off after Phase 3 starts. But I did want to kind of more demonstrate the range as far as what something like that would look like.
So on your first slide, or the one with the overview, you had it listed as 19.62 million for Phase 2. But now you have 15.9.
Yes, so, and the difference there is the real estate acquisition and the design.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So basically, we're just talking about the construction cost here, but we will have had those other
Yep.
expenses that we will have incurred before 2027.
Yep, makes sense.
Okay, yep. Okay, so now to throw another scenario out there, if we don't, have to get it all paid off within 4 years, and of course, this will also depend on our overall financial condition. Let's say we can take 3 million of that, 7.9 million, and pay it off after 2031. Now you're looking at an annual payment of about $1.3 million, levy impact of 75 cents per thousand, or a 6.9% increase. Obviously, that's a little bit more manageable. And then especially if you think about, okay, so 2027, this is 6 years from now. If we worked on, say, a strategy of phasing something in, now you're getting to a much more manageable point as far as trying to, basically work this in with the levy. So, and then the next slide, and this is the optimistic slide to say, okay, well, what if we get an 80% grant to fund that 15.9 million in construction costs? Well, now, you're looking at your existing road budget is $8 million for the 2 years. The city's share on that would only be 3.18 million. So you'd have about 4.8 million left to do other road projects. So that's where you can really see the difference, where before, we're talking about how can we pay this off and impacts on levy. And now if you change it that dramatically, where, rather than covering 100%, you're only covering 20%, now these phases become very manageable as far as even fitting within the overall road project budgets for the city of Stevens Point. But again, I'll say, I do think that that's optimistic. It'd be great if it happens, but the other thing that we need to keep in mind is sometimes when you apply for a grant, if the costs go a little bit over as well, now you're picking up 100% of that. So it's just something to, keep
100% of the overage.
100% of the overage.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yep, thank you.
Yep. So, so we definitely have to be prepared for, okay, that's a pretty optimistic scenario, but we'd have to be prepared for obviously more expenses than that. Okay, and then getting into Phase 3, the central segment. So here, because this is the last phase, we do have more flexibility on the pace of debt repayment. Since it is the last phase, we're not trying to rebuild, debt capacity for the next one. So for this one, if we wanted to spread the debt payments out a little bit more, there would probably be the flexibility to do that. And then also in the mid-2030s, probably 2034 and 2035, we'd be closing TIF districts 5 and 9. And basically what this will mean for city taxpayers is that there's more non-TIF tax base to support the general, property tax levy. The levy is spread over more value, so that should have a sort of decreasing effect or a lowering effect on the overall tax levy. So certainly with financing the third phase, we can basically schedule our debt service payments to go up to correspond with the closing of those TIF districts. It does feel a little bit like, okay, this is great, like we've got it's sort of like reinforcements coming up just a little bit late to the battle is kind of how that's looking. That it's great that we have this, and it definitely helps the overall prospects as far as if we need to catch up on roads and so forth once we're done with the Business 51 project. But again, and it's just the way that the timing works out, but boy, if we had that happening in 2027, it would be, everything would it'd be a little bit more useful, but I guess, we'll take it. I think it is still a positive for the city, the amount of increment that we've been able to generate with some of our TIF districts, the amount that we've been able to grow our property tax base. So the most difficult piece of the timeline, I feel, is really funding phase 2 in 2027 and 2028, as far as that's really, if I could find a pain point in the timeline and the plan, that would probably be the one. I think once we can sort of get over that hill to an extent, then I think things get a little bit easier. So, and just the last slide, just as far as what do we need, to focus on going forward, I think for the Finance Committee of the City Council, one of the biggest things we'll need from you guys is to really think through the tax levy decisions and funding for road projects, funding for capital. That's something, and obviously we have time before the next budget, but certainly I think it's good to think about that now rather than thinking about that in 2026 as we're getting ready to fund the second phase.
Go ahead.
So, and
David has a question.
Thank you, Chair.
Go ahead. Yep.
Thank you, Comptroller Treasurer. And on that exact note of policy decisions, so about these best case scenarios, your job is to be prudent and to be cautious. And I feel like our job is to the extent possible, set ourselves up to achieve the best case scenario, right? Mm-hmm. Because, that 80% hurts,
mm-hmm.
right? We're in the throes of this discussion right now, and we've been given a plan that's been designed to, get us the best case scenario to the extent possible. It also, if you spread the cost out that way, it's easy to lose track of it. And I don't feel great about at the expense of other street maintenance. We struggle a lot to not fall, I won't even say to keep up, right, to not fall too far behind. In terms of that timeline, what I would find helpful as we figure this out is the timeline of seeking the grants. Mm-hmm. Because a big issue I think that's emerged is the relationship between the pieces. And especially to understand the degree to which they're connected or not from the standpoint of, one plan, but is it one grant, is it one grant proposal? I don't know. Really would like to understand that as we kind of get deeper into the discussion. And that's kind of just what I wanted to. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
So are you asking for maybe additional information at a meeting on the various grants? There's a lot of infrastructure money, Build Back Better money. I was on with Baldwin's office today on PFAS funding. And even there's a lot of money and nobody quite knows what's going on. So it would be helpful to have that additional information.
Sure.
I'll I'll go to the others first,
That's
if you don't
fine,
mind.
that's fine.
My question was going to be on grant fitting in as well, so.
Okay.
Especially the first, obviously, if phase two is the pain point, that's 5-6 years out, and it's a little less fuzzier maybe than towards the end of the project, but knowing what we can know would be.
I like that term, less fuzzier. Because that's the sense I get about all the funding that's out there. Go ahead, Sean.
One, it's nice that Corey said that he'd be here in 2029 when someone walks into his office.
Yeah, yeah.
Corey
what you
doesn't
call
have any other
confidence.
plans anytime soon. What I would, this is, kind of goes along the way with the grants as well, but at what point are we gonna have to make the decisions, like, because of course, all the logistics of getting all the material, paying for all that, just like we did with the Hoover Street Bridge and all that, and that took years and years. At what point are we going to, do you think we're gonna have to say, all right, this is what we're gonna have to pay? Because these grants did or did not come, or this grant was short, this grant was over. That's the one thing, because that's gonna be a policy decision that we're gonna have to make a year or so before a shovel hits the ground, or if not, even longer, really. Because I know the grant process takes a long time, and politics change and everything else. But as this keeps going, as this thing keeps going, getting everything in place, booked, materials, they're gonna want their money, and we're gonna have to find a way to get it, and if or when the grants do or do not come.
Sure. So if I use the case of the grade separation as an example, because that was a major project, similar to how the timeline is laid out here, the things that you need to get in place first are you need to do the design, and then also you need to do the real estate acquisition. And those are things that definitely need to happen in advance of the project. So for the grade separation, boy, I want to say we were at least a year before the project where we were doing, real estate acquisition and so on and so forth. So, and that is one of the reasons why you do need that lead time, because you need to design, okay, what you need. You need to figure out, okay, if you need to acquire anything, and then you need to, move forward with negotiating with property owners and handling that whole process and following all the statutory rights that they have through the eminent domain process. So that's really the first thing that needs to happen. And then as far as the rest of it, once you have all of that in place and you've got the engineering documents that you need, you've got the real estate acquired, then typically you're going to bid it out. And then and that is sort of, okay, at that point, you've already obviously got an investment in the project. You put it out for public bid, and then you get the bid results back. And, you hope that, especially with a large project, of course, you're a little bit nervous as far as, okay, what kind of price are we going to get? And then typically the contractor that bids on it would take care of procuring, the materials and everything.
Yeah.
Did you have other questions?
Yeah.
Or
Just back to your presentation, and maybe not so much of a financial question, but just, I guess your reasoning. Is there any reason why you broke this up into the north, the south, and then the central last? Is there any, I realize the north is because of the TIF, TIF 5, but the other two, is there any reason why? Is it, and I do see that, obviously the third phase is the most expensive, so I don't know if that's, you're trying to just, so that we have more time after the fact to recover?
Okay, so the decision as far as which phase happens.
In what order?
When,
Yeah.
it was primarily a Public Works decision, although obviously I did have input on, okay, we have to get this north side in before the TIF district closes, but as far as why the south is going before the central, That wasn't, my decision. I don't know if Director Badoon is available, if he can answer that
And I
question.
can reach out to him outside the meeting, that's fine. I just thought maybe it was you could answer it
Yeah,
quick.
and I don't want to, obviously speak for somebody else. I think it might have been related to
Oh.
pavement.
Hey.
Here, let's let you take that one.
Yeah, the reason why we otherwise broke it out that way is exactly as Corey was understating. First, we know we've got a constraint there on the north side as far as the expenditure period. But then, as any hopefully good public works director would otherwise do, is try to establish it based upon the need relative to the condition of the infrastructure. And so the south side is actually in the greatest need, not just even the road surface itself, which is in the worst condition, but the utilities beneath it. So it has the greatest need overall. I mean, all other else being equal, that is where we would start if it wasn't just for the
Okay.
expenditure period on the north side.
All right, thanks.
All right.
And then the other
Sorry.
thing I wanted to note about, as far as the difference in cost between the central section and the south section, is a big piece of that is inflation. The numbers do include 3% annual inflation, so that is the other reason why that central segment is more expensive.
Oh, okay.
Just,
All right, thanks.
We could have a recession and then everything,
Who knows?
I'm sorry, did I say that? So, all right. Any questions from members of the council? Again, this is very preliminary. The world is always upside down, so who knows what will happen between now and then. So thank you very much, Corey. Next item on the agenda is review of total tax property rate, all jurisdictions for the 2021 tax year. Of course, you saw, and I will get to it eventually. If I can get my sticky fingers, there we go, across my mouse pad. You saw the memo from Corey on that. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, or if anyone has any questions on that.
I would just note that for the average single-family home property owner, their taxes will go down this year due to the lottery credit. So that's definitely some positive news. We already had at least one person call and wanted to make sure that we calculated the tax bills accurately and we weren't missing anything, and that we didn't accidentally upload tax bills from 2 years ago. So that's
Take it.
good. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And buy more scratchers.
Alder Shore, David, go ahead.
So the reference to who qualifies, which I call it, right? It's very simple. The residences all come under that.
So it has to be your owner-occupied residence, and also you have to be a resident of the state of Wisconsin. We do have some people who summer in Wisconsin and winter somewhere else, and yeah. And for those people, if they claim the other state as their residence, they also would not qualify.
Thank you. Any other questions? Pretty clear. All right, thank you very much. Sorry about that. Now we have the action items, discussion and possible action on item 4. Discussion and possible action on a request for additional funding for the purchase of a fire truck. And I believe I was scolded once for calling it a fire truck. It's a fire engine, is that correct, Chief? This was a truck? Okay.
Yeah, there's.
I wanted to make sure because I never. Okay, when I'm scolded once, I always remember it, so
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I honored it the way it should be, so.
Yeah, so, and yes, the fire service, they have a distinction between what's a fire truck and what's a fire engine. I don't know.
Go ahead, Corey.
You want me to start? So, I know Assistant Chief Moody has worked very hard on this. Basically, in 2022 capital, we have $900,000 budgeted for the purchase of a fire truck. Unfortunately, with inflation, supply chain issues, cost of steel, everything else, the price of this fire truck has gone up. So right now, we're looking at $938,000. So basically, the request is for up to an additional $50,000 in case anything else comes up. And a key piece to note is that if we don't lock this in now, starting February 1st, yeah, the price goes up 7%. So that is why we want to lock this in now. I know that the fire department also did reach out to other manufacturers to say, hey, what price can you give us? Because, this is a big cost increase. And they were not able to, I believe, even find the same price.
No, we couldn't.
Let's put this on the floor and,
I'll move that the capital budget be amended for the additional
we have, a-
thousand to cover the increased cost.
we have a motion by Shore, second by Slawinski. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you. I want to commend Chief Moody and the truck committee working with Corey and Pierce. It's a 424 line item request for this thing. And Comptroller Laddick's right, if not approved, February 1st of next year, this truck would cost $1,773,000. So,
Okey-dokey.
pay me now or pay me later. The fire truck or fire engine world is gonna come down to in the next year. They used to be 9 to 12 months. They are now 18 to 24 months out. It used to be that once you signed a quote, you were good. It's gonna be starting sometime next year. Give us the specs. When we're done with it in 2 years, that's your cost. Because they don't have any idea what inflation and, like Corey was saying, supply to cost of steel, what it's gonna cost them, they can't lock in.
Yeah,
So I appreciate borrowing another 50,000 that was in the capital budget, but by doing this right now and having all the paperwork signed, the city's actually saving $65,000.
I went through this earlier today. I had to amend my capital budget for construction. So I started the process with my governing board. Only my increase is significantly more than $50,000. So I completely understand your dilemma. Yeah.
But no, thank you. Any other questions?
Any questions from the committee? Audience? Excellent. We have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thanks Chief Moody, Assistant Chief Moody for the hard work. Yep. All right. And get back to this. Sorry, I got a sticky mouse pad here.
Excited to get started.
Oh, sorry. I'm having trouble with my mouse today, so. Item 5, discussion and possible action on providing the authorization to apply for a WEDC idle sites redevelopment grant for the property at 1300 Maria Drive, former convent property. Of course, you saw the memo. I guess I would entertain a motion to bring it to the floor. Let's try to do it the proper way.
This is my area, so moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Dalton. Director.
Yeah, fairly straightforward. We've applied for the idle sites redevelopment grant on behalf of other private entities in the past. This one is no different. Where the idle sites grant is for underutilized or abandoned properties, essentially. We had worked with WEDC previously just to make sure that the convent site would qualify for the idle sites. Typically, we try to use these types of grant monies for former manufacturing facilities, industrial park uses, and WEDC was very excited to support this project initially. So that's why we went forward with the developer on putting this grant application together. We will be submitting it after next week's council, pending approval as well. And similar to what we've done in the past, it's a pass-through grant. So we receive the funds, we then cut a check to the developer, and then we work with the developer to maintain the reporting requirements by WEDC. So would recommend approval.
Questions from the committee? Audience? Excellent. We have a motion on the floor and a second to approve authorization to apply for this grant. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed would be no. Abstention? Motion carries. Item 6, discussion and possible action on the approval of a proposal from Rutler Corporation for design services related to the Union Street extension. Entertain a motion to bring it to the floor.
I'll move approval.
Move approval by Dalton. Is there a second? Second by Shore. Go ahead, Director, your turn again.
Again, fairly straightforward. The Public Works and Community Development Departments have been working with Rutler, who's the civil engineer for the convent property on the Union Street extension north of Maria Drive. We would try to do these types of design work in-house. Unfortunately, our engineering staff is very busy right now. And so recognizing that, we did ask Rutler to put together a proposal to do the actual design work for the Union Street extension. That cost came at $23,600. Because it was not part of the development agreement, Corey and I felt it was important that this come before Finance and Council for approval. This would be paid for out of TIF number 11, and so we would recommend approval as presented.
All right, questions for the Director? From members of the audience. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve a proposal from Rutler Corporation for the design services on Union Street extension. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions, motion carries. Discussion and possible action, item 7, on a resolution authorizing the submittal of a Wisconsin Department of Transportation 2022 to 2026 Transportation Alternative Program, known as a TAP grant, application to construct the Stevens Point Plover River Crossing Trail Project and the subsequent commitment of funds. Is Director, he's here. I was wondering where you were. Hang on. We'll entertain a motion to bring this to the floor for discussion.
Thank you, Chair. I move approval of the application for a TAP grant and the commitment of our own funds
I'll second.
therewith.
Motion by Shore, second by Dalton. Please, Director, help us through this process.
So where we're at in this process is the TAP grant for the next cycle is due in January. So we're, part of the TAP grant cycle, or what we have to do to be able to apply for that grant is have a resolution showing that we're ready to commit what the funding would be. So what you see in the memo is ultimately where we believe the estimates are at right now with contingencies included. That's the 1.399 number for the project itself. And we show kind of, or how it's laid out is that 80% is what we're targeting for the TAP grant. That would be utopia if we were able to get everything we're applying for. We do need to be prepared that we could get less, and it could range. So that's why you see the range and what the local funding group would be, depending upon what we would be awarded. We are, if we're at that 1.4 million project, the 80% would be over $1 million, which is not as common, but we believe we've got a really competitive grant application. So we're very hopeful, but we do want to prepare for both scenarios depending upon after we would submit that grant.
Okay. Could you help us understand, too, I believe the Friends of Plover River Trail Crossing are raising money to help support this as well?
Correct. So there has been some real successful fundraising efforts done by the Friends of the Plover River Crossing. I believe Steve Menzel is actually on the call as well. I don't know if Steve would like to say a few words, but he can probably give an update on the tremendous success they have had locally.
All right. Mr. Menzel, would you like to say a word? Oh, and if you're saying any words, you're on mute. Hang on.
Steve, I don't see that you're on mute. Is your microphone working?
I guess not.
Hello? Hello? No?
Maybe type a quick note.
Can you give us a summary,
Yeah,
Director?
I do know, Steve and I were able to connect here earlier before the meeting, and I know that it's in excess of over $279,000 that they've been able to pledge for the Friends of the Plover River Crossing. So that group has been, to Steve and the members of that committee's efforts, they've really done a tremendous job gaining support for it. So with their hard work as well as our hopefulness for the 80%, I think we're positioned pretty well for this project.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Alder Shore.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick observation, because I'll connect the dots to another topic, which is Church Street, and just to get away from the idea that that bicycle and pedestrian friendless is applied the same way all over the place, or that, you know, that there's a desire to make every single stretch of our streets bicycle and pedestrian friendly. And the point is that we need this because Highway 10, you know, this is an alternative route to Highway 10, because it's understood that, you know, Highway 10 is what it is. And so that's just kind of wanted to connect those dots. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? Sure, go ahead.
I'm just going through this resolution here, and I guess I'm just scratching my head on a couple of these whereases. They don't make sense to me. That estimated cost is 1.399 million, and that this grant could potentially fund up to 80% of the project. But then the next whereas states, based upon availability of federal funds, the total match may exceed 20%. And I guess I'm questioning where it says 80% and the up to 80% on that the first whereas, or that would be the fourth whereas, and then the fifth whereas is saying 20%. It's just not aligning. And then the next whereas says the total match is estimated to be between approximately 279,000 and 500,000 or more, which 20% of the 1.399 million is the 279. I guess I'm just scratching my head on where these numbers are coming from.
So applying with the 1.399, if we were to
Yep.
get 80%, we're at 279 for the local match.
Yep.
But it doesn't guarantee that we'll get 80. So say they could give 75, they could give 65, it could range. In addition, we're asking for an excess of $1 million. So the program could also come back and say, we'd like to award all of it, but we've spread it across the state, and we only have 800,000 that we could offer the city. So essentially what the resolution is outlining is saying that we're prepared, or we know that if we would get, say, 70%, or if they would cap it at, say, 900,000 or something less, it could cost in excess of what 20% of the project cost could be. Because if the resolution said just 279,000, we'd only be committing to that 20%. This is committing or saying that we're prepared to do more to complete the project based on availability of funding.
Okay. All right. I'll talk to you outside the meeting, but yeah, I don't know why I'm not following the 500,000. I don't know why it just doesn't say 279 or more.
Oh.
I guess that's right, but
Yeah.
I'll call you tomorrow.
Good point. Other questions from members of the committee? Audience, I know Alder Kneebone, this is your area. I didn't know if you have anything.
Yes, actually, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe the 500,000 comes from the Friends of Plover River Crossing's ultimate goal. They would like to raise as much as 500,000 for the project. If I understand what Alder Slawinski was asking, I'm not sure. I may be a little confused now too, but that number was a goal of the committee, the Friends from the beginning.
Is that an accurate?
And truly, this really is the only fast and easy way for half of District 7 to connect with the rest of Stevens Point. If the Department of Transportation goes through with rebuilding the bridge on I-39, it's going to be a nightmare trying to get across there with a car, much less a bike or walking. It doesn't make any sense for us to continue to be separated by a roadway. So I encourage everyone to support this. It's very important for my district and for people coming from the west side to Target and places east of that. So thanks.
Thanks. Was
To
Alder
answer-
Kneebone's?
Yes and no. So 279 or more could mean 300, could mean 310, right?
Right.
But if we're being transparent, the reason that it's stated or written the way is to be as transparent as to say that, let's say we're only awarded $700,000 or $800,000, we're talking $500,000, it could be more. So based on how early we are in this and this construction happening for a few years from now and the way construction costs are going, there's also a whereas in there that says anything over 1.399 would be on the local part. So I wrote it in a way we could definitely rephrase that to say or more, but I also wanted the committee to be aware that or more might not just be 20,000, it might be a couple 100,000. So I could definitely reword that. It was more to be transparent than it was to really be specific to maybe the local grant fundraising portion. It was just that we're playing in a ballpark here where it's some large dollars towards the upper end of the program. So it was written that way just to kind of show that or more could mean more than just say 25 grand more or something like that.
Director, again, there's so much unknown about the infrastructure bill. Again, was on with Baldwin's office today on treatment for PFAS, but her staffer was sharing with us there's going to be a lot of money that's going to be out there. You think there's potential there for additional grant funding?
We do. So in addition to this grant, where there's talk of, we're looking at even like a stewardship grant around May 1st, which is another deadline. And because of some of the property acquisition, the 2.5 acres that was acquired up on Ben's Lane, the natural features along the waterway and things in here, there's some things that hopefully will make this grant score well, even from the DNR standpoint of grant funding. In addition to some of the unknowns of what will be eligible from some of the federal or state funding that'll come down.
A best case scenario, to take a phrase from the earlier.
Yeah, from our comptroller treasurer.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you. I think I had called for questions already, right? Yes.
I have one more, but I don't want to, if there's other questions, I have one more.
I don't think so. I think, yeah, go ahead. One more.
So would we want to, especially with the concern of rising costs, do we want to hold ourselves to that 1.399?
Based on our estimates right now, we have a pretty decent contingency. Rattler, who's working with us, feels accurate, but we could increase it, definitely. But based on our numbers right now, we tried to incorporate that we know this would be first happening in a few years. Our consultants are really confident with that number.
Okay.
Public Works and Parks have been working on it together, so we have no reason to believe that a bigger cushion is needed right now. But as we know, things are unpredictable right now. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good discussion. Thank you, Director. All right, we have a motion on the floor to approve applying for the TAP grant for this project. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And then every year, we get the unpleasant job of writing off some of the lost revenues. You saw the listing. Entertain a motion to bring it to the floor for the discussion and possible action on the approval of, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. Discussion and possible action on approving the write-off of uncollectible personal property tax and accounts receivable.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any questions? And again, this is a perennial sort of thing. Go ahead, please, Alder Shore.
Thank you. So, I guess to refresh memory, so what is the assumption then for the following year? Do we, for budget planning, what happens with these properties?
Okay, so basically we would, when we write these off, because we've recognized it as a revenue before, then this would essentially be recognized as an expense. These are, revenues that we weren't able to collect on.
So we're still, for the following year, we try again to collect what's due?
Well,
what's the assumption from the income side of the budget?
So basically what happens is it means that we're no longer recognizing it as an asset on our books. And basically it means that, we've essentially already recognized the hit for it. but we can still collect these, so if
But we write it down. We don't count on it.
yeah, we don't count on it. And then if we collect it, then it's actually recognized as revenue because we've previously said, you know, we're not gonna get this.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions? Any questions from the other alders? Any member of the audience online that does not? This is, again, one of those regular things. We have a motion on the floor to approve the write-off of uncollectible personal property taxes and accounts receivable. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carried. All right, next item is discussion and possible action on the approval of amendments to the 2021 budget. Go ahead, Corey.
Okay, so oftentimes at the end of the year, we'll also do a budget amendment to sort of square a few things up with the budget. So one of the big items, and we've already talked about this, is that due to extra federal funding for transit, we were able to take some of the money that we would normally give to the transit subsidy and allocate that toward capital. That was already approved as part of the capital budget process. This is basically just formalizing this in terms of a change to the budget document. And then also looking at how the budget is trending. The good news is that we really haven't spent very much at all out of levy for contingencies. So there is money available there. And however, we have gotten hit pretty hard in a couple of different areas. One is related to contracted personnel services, which is mainly related to legal fees related to public safety. So basically, we would be reducing levy for contingencies by 80,000, adding 45,000 to contracted personnel services, and then also IT expenses continue to be an issue. And of course, we did add more to IT expenses for the 2022 budget, but this would be sort of cleaning that up for the 2021 budget to add 25,000 to software license fees and 10,000 to IT contracted services.
Entertain a motion to bring it to the floor. I forgot to do that first.
I'll move approval of the budget amendments.
I second.
And Alder Dalton and Alder Morrow, thank you very much. Any questions for Corey or Comptroller Treasurer? And what we're doing is approving the resolution, which I believe is on page 44, is that correct? Because that's the ordinance amendment.
That is correct, and then the resolution would go forward to the city council, and it would be a separate vote on city council as well.
All right. All right. Barring any discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carried. Discussion and possible action, item 10, on the approval of inter-fund transfers.
Yes.
Motion to,
I move approval of the transfers.
okay, there's a
Second.
motion. And Alder Morrow, second. Go ahead.
Okay. So a couple of transfers to make before the end of the year. First of all, transferring $340,000 from TIF District 5 to TIF District 11. You might remember earlier in the year, we purchased the Maytag property and paid for the demolition there. And at that time, we weren't able to transfer from TIF 5 to TIF 11 yet. But that was approved by the Joint Review Board. So now we can make that transfer to fund those costs. So that's the first transfer. That would be $340,000. And then also, we need to make a small transfer of $2,026 from the general fund to the fire grants fund. This is a cleanup related to an issue with a reimbursement for one of the smaller grants that the fire department received a few years ago. So basically to bring that fund back up above water and make it whole. And then the last one would be a transfer $1.2 million from the general fund to the capital projects fund. And basically, the reason why we're able to do this is we have the continued repayment of TIF district advances, so that allows us to transfer the additional money to the capital projects fund so that we don't have to, borrow for all of our capital projects. We also have this additional source of revenue that can fund capital.
Excellent, thank you very much. Go ahead, Alder Shore, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Echoing my point from before about different levels of priority in different places in terms of walkability, I'm, going to take every chance I can get to talk about 6th Avenue Extension because it is kind of a pet cause, a pet issue of mine, as Director Konoski could tell you, because we're talking about, I think, the place in the most dire, urgent need of improved walkability, particularly because of how campus has been cut off from North Division by the parking lot and its god-awful fence. And I think, a lot of us are excited about what's going on with North Division. And this is a really important piece to break through there where the laundromat was and open it up with a pedestrian walkway and break that separation.
Just as a side note, I was invited to visit with the SGA General Assembly last week, and one of the questions that came from the students was, are you going to get rid of that fence? So, yeah, I assured them the fence would go away. We'll salvage that out, so. All right, any other questions from the committee, council members online? All right. We have a motion on the floor to approve the interfund transfers as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And anyone opposed would be no. Abstention, motion carries. Item 11, discussion and possible action on the approval of claims paid. I'd entertain a motion.
Move approval. Claims already paid.
We have a motion and a second by Shore. Any questions, comments? Nope. All right, anyone online? Nope. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carries. Item 12, adjourn into closed session at approximately, I don't know why I would put that on there, approximately 7:15 PM pursuant to Wisconsin.
Not bad.
Yeah, that's not as, yeah, you're right. I think we should just go at some time during the evening. So, again, I'll start over, in all seriousness. Adjourn into closed session at approximately 7:15 PM pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85 paren 1 paren E for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investment of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session on the following. Item A, negotiating an amendment to a development agreement in tax incremental financing District 11. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second, Slawinski and Shore. Roll call, I believe, is in order.
Yes, Slawinski,
Aye.
Shore,
Aye.
Morrow,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Dalton,
No.
4-1.
4-1, motion carries. We are in closed session at 7:32. We will wait for, we are in open session. Item 13 is to reconvene for possible action on the above referenced closed session items. I would entertain a motion. Alder Slawinski.
I will move to approve the amendment to a development agreement in tax incremental financing district number 11.
Second.
There's a second. Is there discussion on the on the item, I should say, blah. All right. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carries. Item 11, or 14, excuse me, is adjournment, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Unless you want to stay here.
So moved.
So moved, too.
Dalton was first, Morrow was
Second.
second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm not even going to ask for no's. At 7:42, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.
Handles adjourned.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.